good day. Today is iAMradio broadcast number 12, and I will be talking about the moment, being present in it and to it, by not rejecting yourself. So self-rejection is something that you're likely so steeped in that you don't know that you're doing it. I didn't know that I was doing it. Hey guys, what up? Yesterday, I talked about how judgment holds you apart from the feeling that you're trying to find. Thanks guys. Through judgment. So judgment says, hey, this isn't right, and we need it to be right so that we can be happy later, where the happiness that you have now is lost because of the judgment. So you say, it won't be there, so now it's not here. And most of the things that I've been talking about in the iAMradio broadcast series, it's maybe how I should call it something else, because I have such a hard time every time I try to say it. Maybe I don't say the AM, maybe I just say iAMradio. Anyhow, most of the things that I point out in this series, it's just these like crazy ironies of all these upside down, inside out ways that we think about things and approach them that are counterproductive. What is most exciting to me about sharing this work then is the simplicity of accessing what it is that you're trying to find. And I'm coming at this after a very long, arduous, martyr-y style journey where I wish I could say it's super hard. You really have to struggle. But you don't. You only think that you do. And if you think that you do and you need to so that you feel that you're important or you have something to connect to people on about your suffering, you can. I'm not going to take your suffering if you want to keep it. So, but it is what we're looking for. There's only one thing you need to do, and that is to practice acceptance. Acceptance is the trapdoor. It takes you everywhere you want to go, and it is opposite what we've been trained to do. We've been trained to not accept anything, and acceptance doesn't mean like, oh cool, the house is on fire, I'll sit here till it's done. Maybe that is what you have to do, but if there is an action to take, acceptance is not counteraction. Acceptance isn't saying like, see nothing, do nothing, speak nothing, feel nothing. Acceptance says, I see this, I feel this, this is happening. Acceptance is really a mental state where you aren't, when you aren't applying judgment, I'm all distracted, in a way that makes you feel some type of way about it. Yeah, if the building's burning, you're gonna feel hot. Yes, there might be some feelings to process, but it really is, acceptance is your relationship to what's happening. And it actually allows for better action and better response because you're not caught up in all the stuff that actually isn't real. It frees you to be with what is. And when I opened today, I said that I'd be talking about self-rejection, and I said that it's pervasive and subtle, and you likely don't know that you're doing it. Self-rejection is like that little voice inside of you that's saying like, oh, you should have did it like that. It's also the voice inside of you that's saying, they should have did it like that. There is no other. We are one body. If you are rejecting something externally, my friends, you are creating the experience of rejection for yourself. So you have your space, your moment. And so this isn't even about them being the same. It's just sort of saying, here's your desk. Your desk is empty. The only thing that's on your desk is what you pull and put on it. And so if what you want to put on your desk is rejection of what somebody else is doing, then you put rejection on your desk, which is the same as rejecting your own moment and your own well-being. You think you're, who knows what you think you're doing, but the only thing that happens when you judge and reject other people is you bring that to your moment. And like with acceptance, judgment is not saying, sure, that's okay. Be mean to me, lie to me, beat me up. Judgment is not, it is not participation in something that doesn't feel good. Judgment is saying, like, there's a difference. If there is an infringement on your moment and you say ow and you respond to the ow, it's different than having a mental dialogue about something outside of you that puts those negative feelings on your desk. So I could definitely talk about that in greater detail later. That was an area where I had a lot of room to learn because I was like, everything's God, everything's perfect. Ow, 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 ow. I'll stay in the ow because God, 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 God. No. It's kind of knowing that everything is God, knowing that everything is you, being in acceptance and non-judgment doesn't mean that you take punches. And that is something I could talk to later. But okay, so self-rejection basically is this dialogue that is measuring where you are against where you used to be, where you think you could be, where somebody else is. And a lot of the things I've been saying in this series has been like, you probably won't hear it as, hey, I reject you. You'll probably hear it as something else. It's a little tough to sort out the why behind your thinking. The way to do that is to notice that you're having a lot of mental activity. You're either projecting it onto yourself or onto something outside of you. You press pause and you ask, what must I think is true for me to entertain these thoughts? When there's a contemporary conversation going on, pretty much peeps just jump right into the conversation. So they're talking about the thing, not necessarily pausing to ask, why are we talking about this thing? And what do I get from talking about this thing? And how does talking about this thing influence these other things? It's more like, ooh, new conversation, in. Similarly, when your mind is going, you have an opportunity to ask, why? Why am I thinking about this? And what's so amazing about being present to that process and starting to prod and poke it is there are big things that will dismantle almost instantly as soon as you see them for what they are. Your fear that inspires a lot of excess thinking is really ungrounded and doesn't make any sense, and all you need to do is really see it for that, and you can say then, oh, that actually doesn't matter. A lot of the fear people have is around how other people might interpret them. Oh, they might be upset about this, or they might think that. If you take a second and say like, okay, so what if they do? You'll find that you'll be fine ultimately, and actually it's probably best for everyone for you to assert your individuality or your thoughts or your feelings, because one, you give them information that you have that they don't have, which is teamwork and collaboration and what really could be happening in relationships to progress them more holistically. Two, like, you give them the opportunity to do the same thing. I was walking down the street yesterday, and New Orleans, this would say something about New Orleans if this is what stood out to me, but there was a man dressed as a businessman walking down the street, and he had this little briefcase and, the business guy outfit, and somebody else was coming towards him, and they had, their moment of recognition, and the business guy one said something about how, like, sure is early or sure is cold or some generic statement that you could tell hurt him to say. And then the other guy responded using his generic statement, which you could tell hurt him to say. when you're present, you see everybody. They can't hide. Most people hide in the moment by other people not being present to see them. You can't hide from somebody who's watching you, but most people are watching themselves, and so they're not really present to you. And so it's kind of like people are only half there because they're mostly with, am I good enough? What am I doing? What are they thinking about? What I'm doing is, and they're not really with the other person, so they don't see them. But if you're present, you don't give a fuck what other people think about you, or you have enough investment in now to see that that is how you serve others. You can really see people, and you can see how they feel. You can feel how they feel. So here are these guys in this exchange where both of them were too busy acting to acknowledge that they didn't want to act, and also that the other person was acting and they didn't want to act either. And that's an area I see where there's so much room for growth, because if you're the person that says, we don't really want to do this right now, you save the other person. But it doesn't seem like it's safe to do that for one reason or another. And usually you don't think it's safe because then they'll see you. They'll see that you know, anyhow, my point was, I can't remember exactly where I started at. It'll come back, but in kind of guessing, it seems like, okay, so self-rejection would basically be both of them having that exchange. So individually, they rejected themselves by not saying what they really thought or what they really felt. And that is what self-rejection looks like or feels like. It's very subtle. Hey, Leslie, you likely don't notice that you're doing it because you've always been doing it, but it's it has components of adding to what you really think or feel. So I worked at the IRS as a consultant for a while, and like a year and a half, and they did these on top adjustments every month so that they could roll their books into treasuries. People do these, it was a miserable process. Miserable. People do these on top adjustments to themselves, and they don't like to do it, and they only think that they have to do it. So self-rejection is that on top adjustment that says, I need to say it like this, I need to come across like that, I need to act like I'm listening like this. When you allow yourself to be with your personal experience and express what is real and true to you, that is self-love, that is self-acceptance, and that is generally the easiest way to connect with somebody, not with the interface that you've learned. So self-rejection, when I'm coming at things, I'm not classically trained. Maybe I am. Let's say I'm not formally trained. I think life or God and experience did this to me or for me. And so there are phenomenon and words used to describe those phenomenon in the more formal educational settings, like introvert, extrovert. I'm pretty sure an introvert is just somebody who knows how to do an on-top adjustment and it doesn't feel good to them, and they deplete themselves. That takes a lot of energy to shape your behavior to what you think it could be, or your expression to what you think it should be. So I think an introvert is a person who is sensitive to who they really are, and when they're not that person, it's exhausting. No filter. Do you mean on my camera or? Yeah, I think that's essentially what I'm saying is no filter. And going back to questioning the conversation that you're a part of, a filter is something that people take on and run with without really asking, what does it do? And is it really what I think it does? And is it really helpful? And am I accomplishing my objective? I did a broadcast last week on being true to yourself and how that's good for others. if you are in a dynamic with the guy, the example of the gentleman crossing each other on the street and having their little faux exchange, and that not being good or feel good to either of them, what would be at risk if they didn't do that? And allowing yourself to see what you think is unsafe about being honest about what you think and feel is a really enlightening mental exercise, because you'll likely find that under that, there's not really much that's present or real. And when you air out those fears, you're not held in the same way. So I was talking about yesterday how judgment suppresses or depresses an otherwise lovely, joyful moment, and judgment ironically depresses it in trying to get a joyful or lovely moment later, or to make one now. So that is the natural state. And then the mind, ideas of separation such as time and self and space and language, suppresses what would otherwise be a natural experience. And similarly, self-rejection, you would have this feeling of love, except for that you do this thing that doesn't really make sense. Okay, so optimal personal. Oh, and tying it back to dynamics with other people, when you are true to your personal experience, you have the ability to make decisions for yourself that are good for you. So human design is a system I've talked about a lot on my channels. And if it isn't something that you've looked at, I totally recommend. It's called, you would find it at jovianarchive.com. And it's a little unwieldy at first. You can hire me to help you with it, or there are all kinds of professionals and YouTube videos. And human design is helpful because it says, gosh darn it, I have to slow down because I was running towards that from somewhere, and I now have since forgotten where I came from. Gosh darn it. Human design and the other... Oh, human design tells you who you really are. Human design lets you see the features of your functioning that aren't learned. So humans get trained kind of like dogs, but they get trained by systems that don't want the dog to be healthy or free, which is kind of messed up. And it's a big assertion, and whether or not the system is aware of what it's doing or not, I don't think so. But essentially that's what happens. So a person gets trained out of allowing for their natural impulses. They get trained out of being able to follow, this is good for me or this isn't good for me, based on how it feels, because they start to think about it, and then they judge themselves against other things. And so they commit to and make decisions based on a framework and information that isn't correct for them. And then they wonder, why is life uncomfortable? It's like, well, you bought a shoe for the wrong size. Like, that's not your foot. And when I remember now with human design, I was saying about decision making. So human design actually says, based on the energetics of your vehicle, here's how you discern what's appropriate for you. And I think there are 5 different decision making types, and I've done this for 70 people, maybe, or around 70 people, and I've done it clients, so people I know intimately, for myself, and it does seem like there's something there. And so allowing yourself to make decisions based on what feels correct for you or how you work yields life circumstances that feel and fit good because they fit you, not somebody else. Gosh darn it, Shay, who am I really? You're an angel, girl, for real. And I think you don't have any question except if you had a question. So for you being so tapped in and connected to creativity and all your beauty and stuff, I don't think if you go down that hole, I don't think you have to go down that hole to find. And that's essentially my messaging and all of this stuff is you only think you don't know. You only think that you know. You're always who you are. And the practice isn't necessarily coming to see who you are or doing any kind of advanced mathematics. All you need to do is train presence. And from that place, if you let it be possible, you can make decisions that feel right to you or onto you. So in coming to allow for things that feel good, sometimes there's like, you might wonder what if it feels good to have a bunch of pizza, or it feels good to spend a lot of money, or it feels good. Those things don't really feel good. They're more a flash pan feel good. If you are relaxed, there is a psychological tail to that, or even a physiological tail, where if you overindulge on ice cream because it feels good, it really doesn't feel good. So feeling good is being present to information in a way that you're in harmony with it. And when you start to surrender or give up the things that feel good, sorry, my bunnies are rampant today. You think that you're losing something, but you aren't. You're losing escapism. And escapism is good until it's not. It's a way to avoid how you feel. And what you're doing ultimately is trying to get somewhere where you feel good. So you need to be, or it seems like it makes sense to be able to feel so you can make decisions around things that you don't want to escape. I really wouldn't have believed most of this stuff. I didn't even know the ways that I was escapist. So much of how you behave, you can't see. You make sense to you. You're looking out through the world and you say like, oh, I see a pen. I'll move the pen. You don't see other things. If you didn't see a reason to move the pen, even if you knew it was self-destructive, you wouldn't do it except for that. There's something that you think. And yes, there are also impulses. So that would be if the impulse was distorted. And this is, in coming to speak to this block of information in this broadcast series, I'm doing it to practice because there is a complexity there. It's both. There is a both to this information where you are acting subconsciously through fear, which is still a part of all that is and is love. So it's the paradox of the human experience where you're acting unconsciously as consciousness, and so you can never really. And what I want to do in pointing out some of these misbeliefs and where flawed thinking can build up is to say you don't have to follow those rules because they're not real. And when we're looking at the paradox, the symbol that's been most interesting to me is the yin and yang, because it's both. Sometimes it's appropriate to do this and sometimes it's appropriate to do that, and all things exist simultaneously. I'm important, you're important, now's important, later is important. All things are both. And it seems like to allow for those things to be true, you can't think from a place, or you can, but it doesn't feel as true or correct to think from a place of like I or a fear. You would build then a world around you that reinforces separation and fear. And separation is the idea that you and life are not one, but you are. And many of my videos recently have touched on that. We have the illusion of separateness. Look, here's a hand. Oh, here's a hand. They're different. Same fucking body. Same body. If this hand is bleeding, it hurts the body, which hurts this hand. And the world right now, as consciousness rises or expands, is coming to see, oh my God, two hands, same body. We should work what if we worked together? And what self-rejection does is, I talked about how you can project it externally, which depresses your personal experience. But when you reject external, it's the same with the hand. Rampant bunnies, so important. If I'm rejecting this hand, this other person, this son of a bitch, I'm only rejecting myself. When you offer, you might not like what they're doing, but it's likely because there's a judgment around it. And you can watch the last iAMradio to see why that doesn't actually make sense, how you don't actually have an accurate frame against which to judge this person. And remember, when you judge them, what you're doing is raining on your own parade. So anyhow, rejection of the other is also rejection of the self. And in many ways, it seems that if there is something outside of you that's rubbing you some type of way, it's because it's inside. And that skill is part of I talk about X-Men gifts. Generally, if you've been through some stuff, you walk out of it with an X-Men tool. And until you learn how to use your X-Men tool constructively and from a place of love, you can cause a lot of damage to yourself and to others. So one of my X-Men skills is being able to read life symbolically. If I'm using that from a place of fear, it feels like hell. It really feels like hell. If I'm using that in faith, in oneness, in love, then it's a useful tool for me and it's a useful tool for other people. So when you're looking at rejection externally, and if you want help, send me a message, give me your example, and I'll do a free one for you. I'll show you how that likely flips back to you. So what you might see in somebody else is, oh, they're not really investing their time in constructive behaviors. They're being wasteful or disorganized. Sorry to say, somewhere, some way in your own experience, you must be doing that, or you wouldn't feel that type of way about what they're doing. It's also possible that you're jealous that they have that freedom, they afford themselves that freedom, and you don't. So if there is something that's reflecting to you, you're seeing it outside in a way that makes you feel some type of way, that is generally where you can reclaim yourself. And it could be your personal self, your fingers on your own hands, or it can be the other in a way that you see that you are one. And that is how fear squeezes out of the system, in my opinion, in my experience. So I think I went kind of off to the self-rejection side. The key takeaway here would be that when you are in self-rejection, and that can be of your personal self, I'm not this enough, I could be more that, or it could be of the other, they shouldn't be like that, they should be like this. What you do is take your moment, which would otherwise be cool. It's a beach ball. It floats to the top of the water. It's the same as putting your hands on the beach ball and holding it underwater and thinking, what do I need to do to lift up this ball? What magic, what feat of strength and amazingness must I do to get this ball to lift? You ain't got to do shit. You just got to take your hands off it. And your hands is your mind. It's judgment. And like I pointed out earlier, this doesn't mean that you no longer act or that you don't speak, or it means your relationship to what is happening is one of acceptance. If the milk spills, you clean up the milk. You say the milk has spilled. What you don't do is take it every which direction in time and space and say, you must not care about me, you let the milk spill, or what if this, will you always spill the milk, or what is this is this coming from your childhood? The milk spilled. And that is essentially the way to be Buddha-like while life moves through you. And some of the bigger things that move through you can be the bigger blessings if you embrace them. If you don't embrace them, if you say, I'm in this lawsuit, I'm in this breakup, I lost my cat, life hates me, this is terrible, that is self-rejection. And so when you reject the self, it feels like a lot. And you think that it's because of the thing that you feel that type of way, but really it's the rejection of self. So when something is happening and you feel sad or mad about it, acknowledge and appreciate and validate those emotions without thinking that they're wrong, and also without thinking this shouldn't be. Hey, my neighbors have dogs. Cute little ones, but they're real loud. Okay, so that's all I had for today. And if there are any topics that have been particularly interesting or helpful, or there's anything you're working on in your own lab that you would like me to talk to, please let me know. I have a whole list of topics I want to work through on this series. I'm going to move towards doing 24 of them, I think, and then see what happens. My main point in all of them is to address and alleviate the suffering you cause yourself through wrong thinking. And it's kind of like, with the example, like with the dogs, I could, if I wanted, go and make that some kind of thing. Or I could say like, dogs bark, you know? And it seems like there are layers of this experience, and one of them is quantum creation, where you basically create through your observation. And it does seem that whatever you focus on expands. So if you think that the milk always spills, that will be your experience. And it might not be that the milk actually spills more often. It might be that because you're looking for it, you notice it more, which then enlarges your experience of it, because it is more prominent in your awareness. And your awareness, what you are observing, determines your experience. At any given time, you're in a room full of likely beautiful things, and it might not be beautiful in the sense of Renaissance art. It might be beautiful in like its momentary uniqueness. How adorable is it to see that person's shoe tipped over like that? How beautiful the shadow plays off the wall. At any given time, you're surrounded by majesty. It is mind-blowing. But because you call it by name and you think, oh, that's just this, that's just that, you don't really see it. But when you let yourself really see things, and let's say you're blind, if you let yourself really hear things or feel things, there is this miraculousness to experience that we're looking for by trying to get all this money or try to get all this accomplishment or all this thing. It's like, I'll feel that when it's right here, and it'll blow your fucking mind, and it's beautiful. And partly, for me anyhow, what was difficult to digest was, if I'm that happy with where I am, will I go anywhere else? Will I do anything else? And it seems like yes. If you love your animal, if you love your pet, if you love your partner, like truly, and not in a selfish way, like you love them for them and not for you, you take care of them and they grow. You show up to things you love. And when you love it, you do it holistically, and it grows more beautifully and sustainably, versus like, I have to push myself to make this phone call to stay in contact with this person. No, you want to. So it does seem, though, that your experience or your impact will be a lot smaller or look a lot different than maybe you've been conditioned to think. So there are some ideas to digest or discard or just ignore as you move towards allowing yourself to be mesmerized or enchanted by the world around you. And when you pop the hood, like I say, and say like, well, why wouldn't I want to do that? What do I think? Where do I think I'm going when I'm not? You'll see that it really is it's sort of ironic, but you're just trying to be able to be in a place where you feel okay to do that, to sit outside and wonder and think like, oh man, these birds, or to sit across from someone you love and really be present to them, to really listen to them. You can't do that when you're trying to be somewhere so that you're good enough so that the next time or 5 years from now you'll be able to do that. It's so funny. It's so funny. So that concludes my presentation for today. Thank you so much for your time and for coming out today. Nice to see familiar names.